So I've been working on the river, actually on rivers, because on the Amethyst map we have the main river, the Lamar River, which carved the whole valley and gave its name to the whole valley and is famous and well known and all that. But there are also some creeks that flow into the Lamar. So we'll come back to the Lamar, but we'll start with one of these creeks, which I haven't done any work on yet. So there's Amethyst Creek up in the western part, the upper part of the map here, and then Chalcedony Creek, which comes down just below Amethyst Peak and flows down here to the lower right. It does flow into the Lamar, although that happens off of our game map. As far as our map is concerned, the creek starts about here. So we're going to create a river spline and then click right here for where it starts. So I could click and add nodes going all the way down, but I'm kind of eyeballing where the lowest part of the side valley is. And this tool has this really cool, this river making tool has this really cool feature where it reads the topography and chooses the course that water would flow downhill. So we're going to try that right now. So there's the highest point there, and let's see, we wanted this to be about 5,000 meters long. We need a lot of simulation points. So that's probably fine. Okay, we're going to show that it's going to analyze the topography and pick the way that water would flow downhill. And there it is. You can see it. It's kind of it's hard to see here, and it just disappeared, but it does follow the line here going down the slope. So I'm just going to go ahead and generate that now. It takes a minute. And there's our first draft of the river coming down from that high point down the valley. Now that's just using the default white polygon, so I'm going to give it the... So there you can see it's not just white, it's got a little bit of, well, you can see the foam there. It's hard to see the river because it is hugging the ground as it should, because it's following the curve of the ground. Okay, so our river is here. It hugs the ground very nicely. In fact, you can only see it in little spots because it's most of the time just slightly underground. But what we want, of course, is not just for it to hug the ground, but to actually carve a trench in the ground, a riverbed. So this tool has a pretty nice additional feature called terrain carving. And we're going to set our set the shape of the water of the riverbed here. We want it to be fairly steep walls, a little bit of a shoreline lip there, fairly steep walls, and then fairly flat bottom. So maybe make it a little less flat and a little bit more of a sloped lip. All right, so then we can just press carve terrain. And there's a lot of terrain to carve, so it takes a minute. Took the real river thousands of years to create this. All right, so there it is. Well, that's not quite right. There's a lot of trial and error, iteration involved in this kind of thing. You try something, you generate it, take a look and see how it is, adjust the river, not quite right, so undo it and try it again, and just keep tweaking it, refining it till you get it just how you want it. Now with the river shader, this is a really nice river shader called Lux Water, and this just has some default settings, so we're going to tweak these a little bit. It's obviously it's got too much pattern, too much tiling, too much white. I think it just looks a little artificial, so we'll tweak some of the parameters here on this shader to get it to look more like what we want. Not so much foam. Reduce the tiling on the foam. Just a lot of things you can tweak on this shader. It's really nice. And there we have it. There's our river. Boy, doesn't that look great. Not so much, right? I mean, we have the basics here. But obviously there's no vegetation here for one thing, which makes it look not so great. But But there's a lot more to a river than just the riverbed trench and the water effect going down it. All right, so let's turn on the vegetation that we have already set up. Here it comes, and so you can see the trees, the sagebrush, the grasses and stuff, but they're all cleared out along the creek because the tool we're using does that, because you don't want grass growing in the bottom of your creek usually. So we're setting up some new rules for spawning rocks and things here in the creek bed. So of course there are going to be a lot of pebbles and rocks and stuff along the way, all the way down the creek. But those seem a little big. Maybe make them more like that. We could increase the density of them a little bit. We'll hold off on that. So one thing, if you look at creeks, you notice is that the bigger rocks tend to be along the edges of the creek because it really takes a lot more water flow than the creek has on average to push those bigger rocks down. So when the creek is high, they get pushed down. When the creek is low, they get stuck in place. So the tool we're using, Vegetation Studio Pro, has a really cool feature for that. So we can actually make the rocks on the edges either smaller or bigger. So I'm going to scale them up a little bit here. Let's see. There we go. That's probably too much in the creek. So there's a number of different sliders here that adjust exactly how this works. Now these are still kind of small rocks. You don't want them to be too big. We can make them smaller, we can make them bigger, and then we can adjust how far from the middle of the creek that matters. So there we go. So right about there. So they're bigger on the edges, but these are kind of low poly rocks, so I don't want them to be too big. So that looks a little more natural now. So let's add some more rocks that use the same kind of edge scaling rules. We want a nice variety of rocks here because there are plenty that get washed down in the creek. So that looks better now. This cube here, it's a standard 1 meter cube. So you can see the creek's about 3 meters wide, 10 feet wide. So now we have a lot of rocks along the, in the creek and along the creek. They still seem a little big to me. So I'm going to scale some down a bit. Because there are also bigger boulders that you see on creeks like this. So let's activate a couple of those. And these even more use this this rule that makes them bigger, and actually just don't there are fewer in the creek bed itself than along the edges of it. So that looks nicer now. Of course, rocks aren't the only thing that get washed down. You also get logs washed down the creek as well. Lots of logs, in fact, usually. So let's turn those on. Not seeing a lot. Here's a lot. Okay, so that's probably too many. These also have the same kind of edge spawning rule, so we can have that's probably too many. Let's reduce that frequency a little bit. There should be a fair number, but not clogged with it, obviously. And maybe a little more in the creek itself. So there are a lot of things you can play around with here to set the frequency, the distribution of all these things. So one thing, of course, whenever you have water, you have life. And so that means we need to add some grasses along the creek here. Now, there are grasses that stop on the edge of the creek bed because the tool we're using, again, clears those out. But we want to add some in special here. So there we go. That looks pretty good. We can, again, adjust how close these come into the water. We can have them stay really on the edges. We can have them come all the way into the creek, but what's about a little too little? Yeah, it looks pretty good. All right, so there's our creek, Chalcedony Creek. Looking pretty good, but we want to see how it looks in the game now. And here it is in the game. Looks pretty good. Oh, you know what we're missing? We're missing the sound of the creek. There we go. That's better. And you can run along the creek for 4 kilometers, something like that. It's a long creek. You know, all this water is making me thirsty. I gotta take a drink. So, better rivers coming soon to WolfQuest 3.